Shvua Tov. Stay Hashem. I was in the back now just running here, so the guy looks at me, he says, "Oh, so we're not late." I said, "Yeah, we're not late." Thank all of you guys for coming. Several other places you could have been right now, but you're here with me. That's the Hashem. Hashem be with us. So my life story begins in a place, Seattle, Washington. And for whatever reason, whenever I say Washington and Israel, it immediately turns into a conversation about Donald Trump. So I'm here to inform you that I'm talking about a whole different Washington. Washington in the Northwest, far away, tucked away from everywhere else. In Seattle, where it rains all the time, it's very green, very beautiful. A lot of beautiful things going on there in Seattle. A wonderful community that I come from there, a wonderful Jewish community. In the midst of that community, in that same exact neighborhood, the Jewish community there, I grew up and I did not have the Jewish experience as a child. My parents, both my mother and my father, both drug dealers. And after my mother split from my father when I was 2 years old, she married my stepfather, who would be my stepfather. And he also was in the same trade. And right around, I want to say 12 years old myself, I joined the family business. Being a good Jewish boy. Before that, just give you a background of growing up in my home. There was a lot of violence, exposed to a lot of things as a young child. I witnessed there was an FBI raid on my home when I was about 8 years old, and woke up to guns being on everyone in the house. My mother was half dressed with a gun on her, and they were clapping and dancing because they had one of my uncles who was a known drug lord at the time, who he ended up going to prison, I think, for 11 years after that. And I remember, after getting dressed and going to school, seeing everybody that I knew and loved in handcuffs. I didn't know who would be home when I got back home. Nevertheless, they sent me home, to send me to school. Also, around that time, my home was the home. There was a lot of trafficking, about 40 people, I think, on any given day, in and out of my home all day long. My mother was very machpid that we had dinner. We just had it about 1 o'clock in the morning. But we had dinner every day. Seconds, thirds, fourths. This became a big problem. Still working on it. And so this was life, you know. I grew up with this. This is what I seen. And it was very, very hard for me to deviate from what I seen, because this was my exposure as a child. When I was about 9 years old, I started smoking pot. And by the time I was 12, like I mentioned before, I had already started selling it. It was so easy. I had easy access because they grew marijuana plants in my room. I don't know, but worked out for me. I didn't have to go too far. So after that, you know, I just thought that this was life. This is the way life is supposed to be. My first introduction to religion was Islam. My grandfather was a Sunni Muslim. He came to live with us also when I was around 9 years old. And unfortunately, he ended up in a place where there are a lot of Muslims. Not Mecca, but prison. And when he ended up going to prison, from that time on, if anybody had asked me what my religion was, I would tell them I'm a Muslim. So my grandfather taught me. He took me to mosque. I prayed 5 times a day with him. And he was very influential. And by the way, my family, they weren't so religious, so they didn't really care what I was doing. They were just happy that I was spending some time with my grandfather. So when I was around 13 years old, I was still going through that crisis of trying to find myself as a preteen. As we all do. Maybe not. I had friends that were very, very adamant about pushing me to go to this hip-hop program. This hip-hop program was taking place at a day camp, and this day camp was a camp and a center for kids to come after school. There was one detail that I didn't know, didn't really even know what it meant, but they were Christians. It was the Union Gospel Mission, and they were on a mission to spread the gospel. So I ended up going to this place, and nobody said anything to me about religion or anything like that. They just got me very, very involved in the activities there. And also for me, it was very helpful. For the first time, I was around people that had normal, healthy relationships. I was very unused to that. And every day, I was going, to this place, and it was like a safe haven for me to get me out of my home environment and the things that I was exposed to. And one day they asked me if I would like to go to camp. So, unfortunately, I'm very brutally honest, to be honest with you. I grew up in the hood, African American. We don't camp. I said, go where? They said camp. I'm like, I said tents, bugs, bears. We don't do that. So they started showing me pictures of this place, sales pitch, and it was in actual places. It was very, very, nice. The cabins looked more like apartments even. It was a very upscale campground. Nothing like B'nai Akiva. No offense, I enjoyed it. The roofness was great. But sleeping in tents, I don't know how you get kids to leave civilization and to go do that. So I ended up going to this camp, and it was the most fun I had ever had in my life. For the first time, away from my home environment, completely like around people that were like normal, who everybody didn't sell drugs, and everybody, although they took a lot of kids that came from the inner city like I did, there were camp counselors and people. Most of the people that were involved, and I found this throughout my years of youth work, is that it wasn't always about people that were relatable in that regard. It was about people that had the heart. They had the heart. And these people came from suburban areas, but for whatever reason, they had a heart for young people, and it really resonated with us. And every day, they would talk to us, we would talk to them, and they would ask questions, very thought-provoking questions. For me as a 13-year-old, I'm thinking, these are very, very deep questions. Questions like, what are you going to do after you die? What's going to be with your afterlife? And it's very interesting because for every question that they asked, they always had the answer. So this camp was about a little bit, a week and a half, 8 days or so. So it was very, very jam-packed. In between this amazing talk that someone would give every single day that was leading up to an obvious place, which was an altar call and falling down on the floor and crying out. Now, before this, every day he would leave us with questions. And these questions they would bring back to the cabin, and they would ask all of us. And what this did was it gave us a sense of camaraderie. We were able to build with the other kids there that were coming from similar homes like us. And everybody is, speaking as much Lashon Hara as they can about their family and everything else. And so as we're all doing this, the more and more that happens, your heart opens up and you feel a sense of brotherly love. And this carried every single day. Until one night I woke up and I started asking all these questions about the Bible over and over and over again. And I couldn't stop. It was just like a fire inside of me. And then the next day, which is the last day, was this massive altar call. And this massive altar call, they called everyone up who felt like they wanted to make that life change. And I went down and I cried and I became a reborn again Christian, even though I wasn't a Christian before. I don't know how it happened. Tell me I was born again though. Shortly after this, I got very, very involved in all the activities there. Now, I only had really one hang-up. That as much as I love going to this place, and it was good for me because I stopped hanging out with people that weren't good for me, and it got me away from friends who were pushing me and pulling me in the wrong direction, got me out of the house more, got me, in a different place. And although these things are great, I just had really one hang-up by them. Now, although I was so involved in all the programs and I was coming to every camp thing, they just couldn't get me to go to church on Sunday. There was a big problem. And I don't think for me, I don't have to tell you, but American football happens on Sunday. Me and God had a problem with that. So there was no way that I was going to leave the Seahawks game or watching the Seahawks game to go to church on Sunday. But the rest of the day of the week, God, you got me. So as time progressed and I entered into my high school, something happened to me in my 10th grade year of high school. I don't know what it was. It was a lunch hour, and I remember walking in through the doors, And we had off-campus lunch, so I was walking in the doors. I had my food with me. And something just hit me. It was a very, very strong feeling, a very strong urge. But it's almost like I knew something that the rest of everyone else there didn't know. I felt so disconnected. I felt out of place. And I felt, what am I doing here? And what is this thing? What is it that I know? 10 minutes passed. I ate a chicken nugget and it went away. But you should know, it stayed with me, this moment that I had. This time I was also very involved in sports and also music at the same time. I failed to mention I recorded my first record, my first professional song when I was 13 years old. And from that time, that was 15, in my 9th grade year all the way to my 10th grade year, I'd already started receiving national press. And so I was very involved in the music, but my love for football was just unwavering. So by this time, my 10th grade year, I think already I'd become captain on the football team. So in between being a rapper, I was a jockey by day, rapper by night. And I was so always at this time, I think in my 10th grade was the strongest time of trying to find myself. Who am I? What am I? And I was very, very strong in at least my Christianity. So what happened was, I worked my ways up in my leadership Bible study, and they gave me a junior membership card, or junior missionary card. So they gave me smicha. And once I got that smicha, you know, the jets turned on. I had almost half of my high school going every single day to some type of program, and I was just so charismatic, and I became the poster child for the Union Gospel Mission. I was on billboards by the organizations. They put me in the magazines, and it was a thing that I became the poster child of a junior missionary. When I was in 11th grade, in between in that summer, I met the woman who would become my wife. And I want to tell you, she's the real rock star here. There's no way I'd be able to do everything that I do. So my wife has been every single step of the way. She's been amazing. Make sure you tell her I said that. Listen, I need as many points as I can, you know. So that was another life-changing thing for me. She was such a good girl. I felt so undeserving. And we started dating. And, you know, I knew that one thing that told me that she was the one. There were plenty of other things. She was great. She was a sweet person. She had a wonderful personality. Her smile knocked me dead. It was all of that. It was great. But she was a churchgoer. So this was the litmus test. She went to church on Saturdays. She was a Seventh-day Adventist. I know it's from God. So you mean I could have religion, I could have God, football, and a girlfriend all at the same time? It was working out for me. So as things progressed and it got more serious, me and her, I went to her prom, she went to my prom. She was a year older than me. I like older women. So we then tried to, you know, figure out what was good for us. And together we were growing into our adulthood together. And at the time, music, I just couldn't stop. It was just something about it. I just couldn't, it was on my heart. I failed to mention that both my mother and my father were also rappers. They were first rappers in Seattle. There are museums there. That's important over here. If you don't know, in South Africa, also good. So I couldn't stop the music. And I remember that a demo of mine made it from one table to another table to another table and landed on A&R's desk at Virgin Records. Now, as I mentioned to you, I'm giving a description of who I was. I was, you know, Mr. Junior Missionary. I was getting people very, very involved in all the different programs and the Bible study groups there. One of the things was that when the A&R called me from that record label, the thing that was big in rap at that time was a guy by the name of 50 Cent. I hope you don't know who he is. And rap was very rough. And they figured that the only way to sell records, obviously, was if you were in that rough lane. Now, me, I had left this, but my music was obviously good enough for them to start giving me a call. So what happened was they asked me, they said, you know, we want to do a deal with you. We want to offer you something. Only thing is, we want you to send something else in, just something a little bit rougher. Something a little bit, you know what I mean? We don't want to take away from who you are, but we just want you to, you know, rough it up a little bit. Swear word here, there, or whatever, you know? It's a little bit too good. So, you know, I was like, There's no way. Me do that? Where I am now, and all the people in the community and everyone that supported me till now to help me become this, outstanding individual, this junior missionary, it's not going to happen. They sent over a contract proposal, and it had $500,000 on it. I started cursing. Every single curse word I possibly knew came out of my mouth, and I made this record. So along with this record, what happened was there were a lot of people that started slowly coming back into my inner circle, guys that I had left before, that did a little bit more than just rapping about these things. And so I found myself almost back in the same exact situation with the drug dealers, the gang members, and making this music. The other impactful thing that happens to me is one day I was on the phone with my wife, my girlfriend at the time, and I kept noticing that my mother kept on falling over and falling over. Now, my mother was addicted to narcotics, so I'd seen that often, so it wasn't. But this night it was very, very unusual because usually I can get her to wake up a little bit and move around a little bit. But this time she was very, 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 very exhausted, very tired. And it hurt me very deeply. And I remember saying on the phone that, one day I feel like I'm going to try to wake her up and she's not going to wake up. And I went to go put my mother in my bed, and I went to the studio, which was in my basement at the time, and I was there all night. And about 7 o'clock in the morning, my sister and my stepfather came to me crying in tears and said, she's not waking up. And I went up to go shake my mother's body. It was cold. And I remember the pain that came over me was a pain that I wouldn't have wished on my worst enemy. Such a deep, deep pain. Along with my mother's issues, she was also a very sweet woman who, by this time, and I come to my early adulthood, had become like my best friend. I would talk to my mother about everything. So it was very, very hard for me to navigate from then on, looking around at people that I knew who were 60 and 50 or whatever, and still had their parents and had their mother alive, and I didn't have my mother. So this pain was very, very deep. But my mother's death opened up some mercy from family members of mine who had been helpful before in the past, but not so much towards my family because of the lifestyle that my family lived. And they bought me a ticket to New York because they seen I was very interested in the music. And I told them about the offer that I had on the table with this Virgin Records. And I went to go meet at Atlantic Records. I went to Slim Shady Records. I went to Dame Dash Records after he had split from Rockefeller with Jay-Z. I hope you guys don't know who all these people are. And all these situations that seem hopeful, even the Virgin, by the time I got back to Seattle, everything had crumbled. They pulled out. Nobody was interested. And I was left now with this harder record, this harder persona of everything I did in order to get this deal. And now back around the very people that I stopped hanging around. So what do? You just continue. And you continue to go to life. Because once you start something, it becomes a habit all over again. Once you personify certain personality, once you become that, you mamish are it. So I continued making records. And one of the things that happened to me because I had this sensitivity still inside is every time I would meet with a reporter or someone that wanted to meet with me about the music, they would give me a review, they'd end up saying to me, you know what, you're actually really a nice guy. And I think to myself, I'm actually really a nice guy, What does that mean? And it was something for me that I hadn't realized, but I didn't realize that I'm continually coming to you in darkness, expecting for you to see light. On this record, I killed this one, I killed that one, I hurt this one, we did this, we did that. I didn't realize, I didn't hop that, I didn't present myself as an upstanding individual. So these things started to make me think. Shortly after this, what was happening in rap was these things called rap battling. One would make a record, and about this one over here, he'll say the most disrespectful thing that he possibly can on a song. And by that, the other person will respond. And then now, before you know, we have a wrestling WWE match, on tracks. And then at that point, everybody's watching. There's a promotion PR for everyone. So there was a guy who was local who seen that by the time we put out my record independently, everything completely independently, we were selling CDs, getting kicked out of the mall and the movie theaters, soliciting as they would call it. And there was one guy who decided that he would take a few stabs at me. He wanted to say, you know, some disrespectful things about me on the song. And I remember hearing the song, and I was sitting there, and inside, you know, you obviously don't feel good. All of my pride, everything was... So I went to go consult with my chevra at the time. We sat together. It was just like a Sanhedrin, you know. We sat down. And we decided, what would we do? What would be the best course of action from such a thing? And we decided and concluded that if we just go beat the guy up, he won't make any more songs, you know. It wouldn't have to be a go back and forth thing. We could do the real thing. And so we decided to do that. We went to a nightclub. And we went and found this individual there at the nightclub, and we got into a massive brawl. And I feel bad for him because we were like the third car to get there, you know. I had so many people who, at that time, because I had lived for so long as this, you know, Mr. Peace Man, that even still in this realm of life, in this place in life, people still were very overprotective of me. So these guys, they wouldn't let it die down. So of course they riled me up. I was very excited also. I went there. We got into a big brawl, and after that, we all left. We went our own ways. This time, we had an office in downtown Seattle, and I went there in the office that was for our independent record label there, and I got a call. And the call was from another producer that I knew that was local in the area, and he said, the police are looking for you. I said, what are the police looking for me for? Because I fight in a nightclub. Everybody fights in nightclubs. That's what they're for. Well, the reason, you know, you break the glass, hit the guy over the head. This is what nightclubs are for. So he said, no, they said you had a gun, and you took the gun, and you were shooting inside of the nightclub, and everything. So I'm listening to the story, and even though I know that it's baloney because I didn't even have a gun on me, my heart started beating so fast, and I was scared, and I was in a panic, and I remember running down the stairs and running out of the building, and as soon as I get out of the building, I see police lights flashing off of the buildings. But they're not there for me, thank God. And I'm looking at a distance that they have someone surrounded. Police cars, they have guns on them. It looked like it was serious business. Maybe a bank robber or something. That was something juicy. So I want to let you know, one of the things that I was also trained to do while I was in the hood is that if you see police cars, you walk the opposite direction. I started walking towards the police cars. Probably not smart, as they would say, but I did it. And I got closer, and I got closer, and I got closer. And I seen that it was a really good friend of mine who took it up on himself, that in my defense, and then because of his love for me, that he would go and take the other guy's life. So later on, I found out he was a horrible shot, and he missed. He hit the curb, he hit the walls, he hit street poles. He shot the guy's car very good, chased him, looked like Swiss cheese, but he missed the guy. So now I can say, thank God. Back then I was saying, come on, dude, you cannot be a horrible shot. Why? Because now it had every appearance that I sent him to go and take his life. There was no question that this was a really close friend of mine and that we were extremely close. And if it didn't help at all, that now this guy's going to jail, he got me now in a beef because these guys are going to try to come and kill me. Because of his undying love for me that he missed now these people are going to try to come and kill me. And if I don't go and kill this individual first, he's going to come kill me. And when you hit these type of moments, Hashem has an amazing way of allowing a person to see who you really are. And I seen very quickly that that wasn't who I was. And I just started crying. And if it didn't make the situation any better, then now I had this beef with this person. That same individual who shot that gun on that night, we had just released his record as one of the artists on our independent record label. And where do you think I got the money from? A drug lord. So now how am I going to pay this guy back? So without having another beef. And if I don't pay him back in the time that I pay him back, then I have another person after me. So I felt so small, so crushed, and I didn't know what I was going to do. So from that point on, I just started praying. I became religious really quickly. And I was walking back and forth in my living room, talking to God, asking if there's some other way, if there's another type of way, if there's any type of way that I can, what can I do? And I want to tell you that if a person says that there's no hashgacha for a person because he's not Jewish, I'll tell you what, on the third day of praying, I got a phone call from this other individual, and we were able to squash and put everything behind us. That was all God, because I tell you what, there's never been a time that I know of that a person ever called and wanted to know if you wanted to kill them. Hello, I'm just wondering, were you trying to kill me, maybe, perhaps? You don't get those phone calls. Shoot first, ask questions last. That's just the way you grow up. So the fact that I got that phone call, I took that immediately as divine providence, and I was able to squash that and put that behind me. But what did I do about the other guy that I owed the money? I did every single thing, legal, not legal, that I could in order to get that money back to that person. I was crushed the whole entire time of always finding another way. And to Hashem's also, to his wonderful, wonderful mercy, before everything completely closed up and I could pay him back on that day, that person also went to prison. Hashem set me free. And so there I was, seeing that the divine hand of God, and it made me see that the power of prayer. It made me see the power of prayer. So I continued. And I had to make a cheshbon. I said that if I continue and I make music and I do things in this type of way, the next time it could be the real thing. So, pacing back and forth, I realized that I wanted to do something different with my life. And so I started praying more and more and more and more and more and more. And what happened was that these questions that I had as that young junior missionary in those Bible study groups, that I needed to have these fiery answers that I had about the Old Testament, they were never really answered. And so these questions started to rise back up inside of me, and I wanted to know the answers. And at this time, I had nobody to go and talk to. So it was great. For Islam, there was somebody there. My grandfather, he came. He brought me in. Christianity, someone came. They brought me to these different groups. But now, for the first time, I'm searching for what the actual truth is for myself. There's nobody there. Who's going to help me? So I figured I would go to a very, very great and intelligent rabbi. No offense if there's any rabbis in the room, but I always tell everybody, you ain't got nothing on this rabbi. I hate to say it. The name of the rabbi is rabbigoogle.com. Rav Agon Shlita. I just don't know if there's a rabbi that has much as information as Rabbi Google. So when I went to Rabbi Google, it's very, very interesting as I conducted my search. Everywhere that I went, no matter what I typed in on Rabbi Google, Chabad.org came up. Must be quite a few Chabadniks in this room here. So it didn't matter. Whatever I did, I typed it in. I typed in J, Chabad.org, Jewish holidays, whatever it was, Chabad.org came up. Elvis Presley, Chabad.org came up. So I started going on there, and I started to look in between there. There were other sites that I was going, and what intrigued me more is that when I started seeing these things, I said, you know what? I need to dig up Christianity from its root. I need to see everything from its root. I started ordering books on the church fathers, the Didache. I went very, very deep. And by this time, my biological father, I think it happened actually in 1996 is when it originally happened, but he became first a minister, then he became not only a pastor, then he got his doctorate, and now he's a Christian theologian and a professor. So not only do I have in between Rabbi Google, I can go to my dad and ask him a few questions. I never let him know what I was up to, but I would start asking him very, very deep questions about the Jewish holidays, about the Christian holidays, how did it all happen, what was the split. I needed to know, and I needed answers. So I started to dig things up. And along with Chabad.org, there were a lot of other people that were online that were like in between. They were a little confused. They were mixed. They were Jewish, half Christian, half Jewish, half Christian. So they were very confused. But anyway, I was just as confused as them. So I said, what are we going to do? And I remember, after all my research, I was sitting there probably 8 hours a day, sitting there researching. I wasn't talking to nobody. My phone was off. I was just 8 hours a day sitting there. And by this time, me and my wife, we were newlyweds, and she comes in and she's like looking at me every day over there, but she doesn't know what's going on, but she's afraid to ask because one side of this book has English and the other side of it has hieroglyphics. So she comes in one day and I tell her, hon, I want to talk to you. Let's sit down. So I go sit on one couch. She goes sits on the other couch, and I made sure I was a good distance just in case anything went flying across the room. And I told her, my darling, I've been doing a lot of research, and I've come to the conclusion that I no longer want to celebrate Christmas, and I don't want to celebrate Easter. She said, I don't want to be married. And this began this tug of war, so to speak, of trying to figure out who we would define ourselves as a couple and as individuals, but much more so as a couple. What do we define ourselves as religiously? And my wife one day was like, don't talk to me. She didn't want to talk to me. And she found herself reviewing and going through all of my different notes and seeing some of the things that I've seen, maybe spent some time also by Rabbi Google. I don't know what he does for marriage counseling, but he also did a great job, because one day my wife came to me and she said to me, I feel as though I've been lied to my whole entire life. I feel that I've been lied to. And her pain was so deep that she was upset with Hashem. It wasn't this great thing that I felt like, wow, God, look at all this information. For her, it was completely as though she'd been lied to and she had been, bamboozled her whole entire life. So from then, we tried to figure out, where do we go? Where does all of this fit? Okay, we have the whole thing where if you don't believe in JC, then you go to hell. That's a problem. But yet we're seeing that Hashem's Torah is very true. It's very real and very alive. And the Jewish people are indeed Hashem's people. So what do we do about this? So, when you find a new love, you don't even know what to do. You see some people, they're new on the job. You ever go to a place and you start asking for help, and there's a person, every excuse is, oh, I'm brand new, I'm new here, I don't know, I'm new here. Make all the mistakes, the rookie mistakes they call it. We made a lot of rookie mistakes. One of them was that they said that, it says inside the Torah, you're not allowed to work on Shabbat. So I just stopped doing the dishes. The first thing, it's worked for me, especially the greasy pots. I was like, great. I saved them until Saturday specifically, so I didn't have to do them. I said, so we didn't know what to do. So I started going to this place, this Messianic place. And there, I spent about 2 years at this place. And it was also a learning curve. I walked into this place, beautiful Aron Kodesh. They're reading out a real Sefer Torah. They have real Sidorim there, and Art Scroll Sidorim, and they have, a Talit. And one guy here, and he's davening on a shtinder. He's wrong. And it was completely foreign to me. And I went to this place, and I said, wow, this place is, it's a bit much, but I'm going to try to catch up. I'm going to try to learn as much as I can. And they told the line a little bit of being more traditional, and then also there were these very weird things. And the more and more I learned, and the more and more time I spent trying to find the truth, it looked further and further and further away, that authenticity that I was looking for in serving God. And so I remember telling my wife one day, I said, I don't know what it is, but I'm just feeling like I want to move on. Maybe we weren't done searching. Maybe we weren't done. Maybe we're not settled at this place. And there were a lot of things that I were having problems with inside of the New Testament. And I remember sitting there and remembering along my journey at the peak point of when I told God, I don't want to know anything other than your character. I want to start over and I want to learn who you are. And I remember I read the Tanakh, cover to cover, twice. Cover to cover, and I only was looking for Hashem's character. What do you love? What do you hate? And the thing that stuck out to me the most was that no matter how far or no matter how low that the Jewish people sunk, Hashem was always there to lift them up with comforting words. And as a young individual myself who grew up in a home where I did not hear comforting words, I did not experience comforting situations, these were very comforting for me, but there was only one problem. He wasn't talking to me. And I seen that, and it inspired me. And I began to have these emotions again, and I told my wife this. And there were several things that I disagreed with at this place. By this time, me and my wife were already keeping kosher, and a kosher home. We just really didn't eat meat in the house also, because that was a lot easier. She was a vegetarian. more meat for me. And so we just really tried to figure out what can we do. So we went to this conference. Now, you should know that there was this major conference coming in town. There were all these different congregations that were the Judeo-Christians that were coming to meet in Seattle for the first time. The big dance was happening in Seattle. And they briefed us before that this conference happened, and they said to us, no matter what you do, do not talk to the rabbis that are going to be sitting in the lobby. There are going to be rabbis sitting in the lobby, the Orthodox rabbis. Don't speak to them. Don't say Shabbat Shalom. Don't say how you doing. Don't respond to them if they talk to you. Whatever you do, do not talk to these rabbis. So we decided that we would not only go to this conference, but instead of going in, I'll hang out with the rabbis in the lobby. And that's what I did. I spent 4 days outside in the lobby. I didn't go inside. And I talked with the rabbis because for the first time I had somebody other than Rabbi Google I can actually talk to. And I started to ask questions. And this rabbi's name was Rabbi Michael Skolbeck, who was the educational director for Jews for Judaism in Toronto. And the other rabbi was a Chabad rabbi of Australia, Rabbi Eli Cohen. And I sat there with these rabbis, and we went back and forth, and I had all these different questions for them. And I couldn't understand why I couldn't make the two things work, why I couldn't, save my ticket from going to hell because I don't believe in him, and also keep, what can I do? How weird is it? And I remember one of the most impactful things that the rabbi said to me. He said to me, I want to tell you about Ruth. I said, I know about Ruth. I read Tanakh twice. I'm expert. I know this. He said, but no, I want to tell you something. He said, Ruth says that your God will be my God. And I start finishing, yeah, your God will be my God, your people my people. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I know. And so he says, what is he saying? He says, ultimately, he says that you are saying that I will accept what the Jewish people accept, and I will reject anything that the Jewish people reject. And more than anything theological, these were the words that hit me deep into my heart, deep into my heart. And then I went home, and I found myself again in another crisis of trying to figure out what's the truth, what's not again. And I came to a very simple conclusion. I said, you know what? My studies of going back and researching and looking at Islam, if I believed in Islam, then I would have to say that God changed his mind a couple times. Not once, but twice. He had amnesia. Then the second time, if I would say that Christianity, if they was the actual religion, that God changed his mind at least once. At least once he said, I need to switch things up a little bit. So I concluded from that if that's the truth, what stops God from changing his mind the next time the next guy rises up with the next religion? And I concluded that at least by Judaism, I'd be saying that God never changes his mind. He never changed his mind. Because you could look around and see that the Jewish story is involved in their stories, but their story isn't a part of the Jewish story. And going back and forth, and my wife comes to me and she says that I want to make an Orthodox conversion. So remember I began telling you guys about my story and all the ways that I grew up and everything? All this took place inside that Jewish neighborhood. And so my wife telling me this, we found a place to go back to inside this Jewish neighborhood. And before we even did that, I was very nervous because I'm looking around and don't get me wrong, it's just where I come from, I just never seen a black Jew. And I've been all around the world and been stared at by many people. I've taken selfies with a lot of people that don't know about Hashem Melech. Mister, you take picture with me, Mister. That was in Russia. And so it was a phenomenon for me. I never know. And I remember checking out groceries one day. And as I'm checking out these groceries, beep, 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 I hear behind me, Shabbat Shalom, brother. And I turn around. It's a black Jew. He grew up in a conservative home His mother used to be the nanny for a conservative family. They took them in after they fell on hard times. He ended up converting. He grew up. He went to a Jewish school. And then later on, he made an Orthodox conversion. And after that, they had problems, so he had to make another Orthodox conversion. He had been through a lot. He's telling me a story. Then he started inviting us for Shabbos. And from that, also, too, it helped me to know that it was very, very possible. So not only was it me that went off the deep end, by this time I had my wife with me. My wife and her sister's husband, who was my brother-in-law, my best friend since kindergarten, we all decided to move into this community. And just before we go to the Beit Din, the rabbi sits us down one day and he says, listen, I want to tell you, you guys are all squatting in the same house, and there's a little problem here. He says that if one of you guys finish before the other, you're going to have issues with cooking on the Yamim Tovim. It's going to be a big issue. And besides, you guys are two separate families. It's really much better, even for whatever issues, for you guys to be in separate homes. So we ended up moving out. And the time came for my family to first go before the Beit Din, before the fiery court of rabbis with beards down to the floor, staring at you and asking you very, very deep questions. It was an interrogation room, more like. So we ended up going, and for whatever reason, we made it out very unscathed. And my brother and sister-in-law were supposed to go about a month afterwards. But something happened in the kashrut that the rabbis needed to make an emergency meeting about a week later, and my brother and sister-in-law were moved up in that time. And for whatever reason also, too, they made it out unscathed. But the rabbis were so impressed, and had such a love for both families, that they realized that the best way to do this was for both families to do it together. So, Chazdei Hashem, 4 years ago, me, my wife, my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law, went to the mikvah on the same day and had a double wedding, and that is the story of myself. Thank you. 5 minutes. Thank you. Before I go, they told me I had only 5 minutes, but I wanted to say something also before that. That more than anything, I have in those conclusions that I came to at the time. One of the things I could tell you is that I seen more than anything was a supervision of Hashem all the way through. And now in retrospect, I can see that all the situations that I was saved from in my life, I watched my house burn up. I've seen gunshots at my feet as a kid, walking and hitting the sparks and making it out unscathed. I've seen a lot of things to see Hashem's hand upon every single thing up until this point. And I want to tell you that when I moved to Israel 1 year ago, and I want to tell you also too, I have not, and everybody should clap for this, for themselves, and I know that other people have different experience, but I have not endured a piece of racism from the Jewish people. Not once. Not once. But even with that, everyone fears that I would. So I remember meeting with one of the posek of the yeshiva, and I was telling him, I'm very interested after I got to Israel to get my kids inside of school. And one of the things he told me was, listen, I'm going to be very straight with you. I'm going to be very honest with you. It's a different world over here. He said, you have a lot of things against you. First off, you're black. You're Jewish. You're a convert. You're a chassid. And you're Breslov. He said, you have a lot of things stacked. Maybe there's a school out there for your children. I don't know. But this is, let's talk about it. But I want you to sit with that. So I remember, as he was saying each thing, I'm like crushing down into my seat, And I remember when I went home, I went to go talk to Hashem. And I asked him, I said, well, thank you for letting me know my weaknesses, Hashem. But I have any good points, any greatnesses? And you know what he revealed to me? That I was black, Jewish, a convert, a chassid. I was Breslov. I realized, in all of my weaknesses was my godless. That was my greatness. In the very places that a person finds that they're very vulnerable, that's where the godless comes from. Because of all of those disadvantages, I go around the world almost every month, I feel like. And into many different places and get to inspire many people to live a fulfilled and awesome Jewish life because of all of my lackings. And why is it that? Because in the place where we are vulnerable, where we have the most lackings, we can't brag. There's only Hashem there. So the godless of a person, as in all of the things that appear as though there's no strength. There's no strength. And it made me later on think about that. Who does Hashem go to be the spokesman for all of Am Yisrael? The Moshe Rabbeinu, who can't talk. He goes and gets the king from out of all the sons of Jesse. He goes and gets the guy that Jesse is not even sure if he's his kid or not. He's in the back, walking around with the sheep. Why does he choose Am Yisrael? Not because you're the greatest, the biggest, the strongest. He says specifically because you're the smallest and the least of the nations. And through that is how we express as Hashem's godless. Thank you so much.